Good morning, everyone. We'll start with some opening remarks from Dr. Lopez.
Good day to all, and welcome to this significant and timely webinar hosted by the Filipino Nursing Diaspora Network in collaboration and partnership with St. Anthony's College, the Pacific Nursing Service Organization, and the World Continuing Education Alliance. We are truly honored to gather today as a global community of nurses, educators, and leaders to explore the timely topic: global journeys, local commitments, understanding Filipino nurses' intent to stay abroad, an issue that speaks to the heart of the Filipino nursing diaspora experience. Today's research speaker, Dr. Blaise Nieve, brings with him not only exceptional academic and clinical credentials, but also lived experiences that echo the realities faced by thousands of Filipino nurses across the world. As a respected leader, educator, and researcher in the United States, Dr. Nieve's insights help us better understand the complex medications, motivations behind our global nurses' decision to stay abroad, decisions rooted in opportunity, purpose, and personal growth. As we begin this session, I encourage everyone to reflect not only on policy and data, but also on the human stories behind these global journeys. Stories of resilience, sacrifices, and deep rooted commitment to both host and home communities. May today's conversation lead us to greater empathy, smarter policies, and stronger solidarity across borders. Thank you for joining us, and may this session be a source of learning, connections, and inspirations. Maraming salamat at mabuhay ang Filipino nurses.
Thank you so much for those words, Dr. Lopez. Now, I would like to again welcome everybody to today's session. My name is Samantha. I work with the WCEA, and I will assist you with any technical questions you may have in the chat. And for those joining us for the first time, WCEA is a social impact technology organization dedicated to using digital tools to help healthcare professionals grow their skills, improve care, and support healthier communities worldwide. If you have any questions for our speaker, please post them in the Q&A section and we'll address them towards the end of the session. And now I would like to hand it over to Dennis, if you would like to take the stage.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Yeah, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar titled Global Journeys, Local Communities, Understanding Filipino Nurses' Intent to Stay Abroad. I'm Dennis Amando. I serve as the Vice President for Engagement of the Pacific Nursing Service Organization. I'm honored to be your moderator for today's learning session. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank our partners. Those are already mentioned by Dr. Lopez earlier and also Sam. These partners made this event possible: the Filipino Nursing Diaspora Network, Pacific Nursing Service Organization, St. Anthony's College in Antique, and the World Continuing Education Alliance. Thank you for your collaboration and continued commitment to empowering Filipino nurses and advancing global nursing education. Today's discussion focuses on a topic that speaks to the experiences of thousands of Filipino nurses worldwide, why many nurses choose to stay abroad, and how their professional paths, personal lives, and community commitments shape these decisions. We hope this session gives you both insight and inspiration. So just a few reminders: you may feel free to ask questions through the Q&A at any time, and then the speaker would be very happy to address them later. And the session will be recorded. And yeah, after the session, feel free to share your reflections on social media and tag our partner organizations, the FIND, PNSO, SACN, WCEA. So at this point, I would be introducing our resource person because today's topic, why many Filipino nurses choose to stay abroad, is something our speaker understands both through research and lived experience. We are joined today by a clinical nurse at the Duke University Hospital, an educator and a certified medical surgical nurse, and a nurse executive. His nursing journey spans the Philippines, the UK, the US, giving him a global perspective on Filipino nurse migration. Our speaker holds two doctoral degrees in nursing and educational leadership, and he is currently completing his Doctor of Nursing practice at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And he is also a fellow of the Clinical and Transformational Research Ethics Fellowship Program at the Medical University of South Carolina. He has taught and led nursing programs in the Philippines and currently serves as adjunct faculty at San Pedro College, Davao City Graduate School, and is also teaching at Durham Technical Community College in the US. He has been honored as one of the North Carolina's Great 100 Nurses and as a fellow of the Society of Internationally Educated Nurses of North America. Next week, he'll be confirmed as a fellow of the Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery in Dublin, Ireland. Our speaker has contributed significantly to the understanding of Filipino nurse migration through research that explores job embeddedness, sociocultural adaptation, job satisfaction, and factors influencing the nurse's intent to stay abroad. His work provides valuable insights for health workforce retention and global health systems. With his rich experience across countries and health systems, he is the perfect person to help us understand Filipino nurses' journeys, commitments, and decisions to stay abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker Dr. Blaise Nieve. Dr. Nieve, the virtual floor is yours now.
Thank you so much, Sir Dennis. Thank you, Sam, for organizing once again this webinar on behalf of Filipino Nursing Diaspora Network. And welcome. I think we have 78 attendees for this session today. Let me just, this one. Let me just set up my end. Okay, before I start, can you all see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Yes. Okay. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. I want to sincerely first thank you for joining this session. Once again, thank you, Sir Dennis, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Dr. Blaise Nieve once again, and I'm a clinical nurse and a researcher focused on the global nursing workforce, among many things. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into a critical topic affecting healthcare systems worldwide, which is actually global journeys, local commitments, understanding Filipino nurses' intent to stay abroad. This is about more than just immigration, as it's about essential contributions and the complex human decisions of a foundational part of the global healthcare team, which is us, Filipino nurses. Okay, so over the next hour, we will work toward three core objectives. First, we will analyze the current trends and challenges in Filipino nurse migration, looking at the push and pull factors and the workforce dynamics in major destination countries, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Middle East, and others. Second, and most critically, we'll examine the psychological and professional drivers that keep these nurses in their adopted homes. We'll explore the roles of job embeddedness, sociocultural adaptation, and job satisfaction using recent evidence-based research. This helps us move beyond simple economic reasons to understand the commitment to stay. Finally, we will identify practical implications for health systems, for policymakers, and for the diaspora community itself. Our goal is to outline strategies that genuinely support the retention, well-being, and the professional integration of Filipino nurses in global healthcare. Now, before we proceed, I'd like to quickly address my disclosures. Please note that the views expressed in this presentation are my own and they do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the Filipino Nursing Diaspora Network. The content is based on my own research, as well as robust peer-reviewed studies in this topic. I have ensured all sources are appropriately acknowledged, and I stand by the evidence-based perspective presented. Importantly, as much as I would like to have one, I have no relevant financial or non-financial relationships to disclose that would influence the content of this presentation. As we embark on this topic, I'll offer a quick note on my perspective. Once again, I'm Blaise, and I approach this research not just as a scholar, but as a practicing clinical nurse at Duke University Hospital. My clinical work is complemented by my current doctoral studies at UNC Greensboro, and I'm honored to contribute to the next generation of nurses and nurse scientists as an adjunct instructor at Durham Tech and San Pedro College. My involvement extends to leadership roles with the Medical Surgical Nursing Certification Board here in the United States, and the Philippine Nurses Association of North Carolina. These diverse roles, from the bedside to the boardroom, give me a nuanced understanding of the challenges and resilience we'll be discussing tonight. It's this blend of clinical experience and research that informs the insights you'll be hearing from me today. And on a more personal note, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the time of the year. Given that we are now fully in the season, I want to wish everyone happy holidays in advance and a safe, restful, and successful new year. All right, let's start. To truly understand the journey of Filipino nurses abroad, I want to start with a brief look at my own journey. Right after becoming a registered nurse in the Philippines, my first professional commitment was actually to the system that prepares nurses for work. I joined the licensure exam review preparation industry as a review assistant and then a national review expert. I taught subjects like medical surgical nursing, psychiatric mental health nursing, and PALMA, among many other topics. This experience gave me a unique early insight into the volume and preparedness of the nurses who would soon be making their own global journeys, setting the stage for the topic that we are discussing today. After that, the time that I spent as a national review expert gave me a bird's eye perspective of the entire nursing pipeline. But soon after I shifted my focus from the classroom back to the patient, I began my hands-on clinical career as a bedside nurse in Davao City, Philippines, starting specifically as a dialysis nurse. My journey then continued in Manaba City, where I broadened my clinical skills working across both adult medical surgical and pediatrics unit. This experience was incredibly challenging. The patient ratios, the complexity of the cases, but it was also invaluable. It truly honed me to become a better, more versatile nurse. However, my story reflects the reality that many of you know well. The pay for nurses in private Philippine hospitals during that time was simply not attractive. The compensation often didn't match the immense dedication required. This economic pressure, coupled with a deep desire for continuous learning, drove my next critical step. Soon after earning my master's degree, I transitioned out of the hospital and into the academic world, becoming a nursing clinical instructor. My move into the academia led me back to Davao City, where I took on the role of clinical instructor at a private higher education institution in Davao City, which offered PSN. This felt like a natural return to my teaching roots, and it was deeply rewarding experience. By training the next generation of nurses, I wasn't just teaching clinical skills, but also I was helping to shape their professional identity and preparing them for the global opportunities and challenges ahead. My time as an instructor gave me a valuable perspective, the supply side viewpoint of the highly motivated and rigorously trained workforce the Philippines produces. This experience is actually essential to my research as it highlights the immense professional potential we are discussing when we talk about nurses choosing to stay or leave their destination countries. The commitment to education quickly actually escalated from clinical instructor. I rose to become one of the RL supervisors of the program. And then shortly thereafter, I became the program chair for nursing in that same institution. This elevated me to the role equivalent to the Dean of Nursing in the Philippines. I genuinely loved the leadership position, navigating its constant struggles and challenges. There's no greater professional honor for me than watching my students succeed. I'm proud to say that during my tenure, our school actually celebrated its first ever top 1 licensure exam passer and achieved commendable overall national board ratings. Our program even became the 7th top performing nursing school during my stint. in the Philippines. Critically, my time in the academic leadership also provided me with connections, opportunities, and an income level that most nurses in the Philippines would consider financially comfortable. However, despite this deeply rewarding career, despite achieving a leadership role, of which I loved, and then despite the comfort of being close to family and earning a very respectable income, I ultimately made a decision to leave. I chose to embark on overseas work. You may ask me why? My personal journey is not unique. It is a profound illustration of the very complex forces at play for the Filipino nursing workforce. It proves that even when you are professionally fulfilled and financially comfortable at home, circumstance and opportunity can compel you to leave. The drive for greater competitive benefits or simply a different future can outweigh even the deepest familial and patriotic commitments. This decision, this balance between global journeys and local commitments, is the heart of our discussion today. It brings us directly to our first major topic, which is contextualizing the Filipino nursing diaspora. Let's now look at the trends and history that frame millions of decisions like mine. Now, let's begin by grounding our discussion in history. The mass migration of Filipino nurses is not a recent trend, as you may all know. It's a phenomenon rooted in deep historical and structural ties, forged primarily with the United States. The key pivot point was 1965. Following the relaxation of the US immigration rules and the establishment of a preference for healthcare professionals, a significant and well-trained labor force began migrating en masse. This historical trajectory established a critical and often painful paradigm. Migrant Filipino nurses historically accepted inequitable pay and work arrangements in destination countries. They traded this adversity for the dual benefit of comparatively higher salaries and, crucially, immigration opportunities. This foundational context helps us understand why modern Filipino nurses, despite their high skill levels, may still find themselves enduring adverse working conditions abroad. The result of this history is clear. Today, the Philippines is globally recognized as the largest exporter of nurses worldwide. But this global significance comes with a steep domestic price. This profound outflow has led to an internal crisis. The Philippines now faces a projected domestic nursing shortage that could reach 250,000 by the year 2030. This is not merely an inconvenience, as it poses a significant threat to the survival of our own health system in the Philippines, adding immense pressure to the very definition of the nurse's global journey and local commitment. Now, let's quantify this diaspora. When we look at where Filipino nurses are currently choosing to work, the data is very clear. Deployment remains highly concentrated across three major global corridors: North America, the United Kingdom, or Europe, and the Gulf states. Now, the United States actually remains the historical primary destination, a true powerhouse for Filipino nurses. Historically, the United States has employed 56.8% of the cumulative total of Filipino nurses sent abroad since 1992. Let me repeat, more than half of the Filipino nurses who went abroad went to the United States. To put that in perspective, as of 2022, Filipino nurses constituted a remarkable 33% of all foreign-born RNs in the United States. They are the largest single group of foreign-trained nurses, accounting for 4% of all US RNs overall. The pipeline is still robust. Actually, when you look at the recent data, the Philippines accounted for 51% of all visa screen applications from healthcare workers in 2024. This shows that the enduring preference and reliance on this workforce. However, deployment is diversifying. We can now see two other vital corridors, the United Kingdom and Europe. The UK alone had over 47,000 registered professionals educated in the Philippines as of September 2023. This growth reflects the UK's aggressive recruitment efforts in recent years. Now, for the Gulf states, this region, encompassing the Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and others, collectively accounts for 12.5% of the total deployment. The number are staggering. In Saudi Arabia alone, there's an article that said that there's an estimated 130,000 nurses from the Philippines in Saudi Arabia currently. And the trend continues in other key areas like Canada, which has over 44,000 Filipino immigrants in nursing occupations, according to a data in 2016, and Australia, which consistently relies on the Philippines as a top source for international nurses. Even the smaller specialized markets like Ireland, Singapore, and Japan, specifically for elderly care, are part of this network. This data doesn't just represent job movement. It highlights the global strategic reliance on highly skilled Filipino nurses, which raises the urgency of understanding their intent to stay. Now, the intent to stay or migrate is driven by a powerful confluence of global demand, which is the pull, and domestic deficiencies, which is the push. Host countries attract talent with perceived advantages in compensation, better working conditions, and superior career opportunities. This much is obvious. The high value placed on nursing skills in destinations like the US and Canada is viewed as a ticket of the migrant nurse to financial freedom in the old age. So that this is what pulls nurses to go to work overseas. However, for push factors, the second edge of the sword, you may say, um, the primary catalyst for departure, or the push factor, once again, stems from deep structural crisis within the Philippine healthcare system. These domestic failures include extremely low salaries, heavy and imbalanced workloads, job insecurity, and recurrent delays in the disbursement of mandated benefits. This pervasive burnout among Filipino nurses is a critical factor leading to resignations, career changes, and subsequent migration. Added to this, the COVID-19 pandemic served as a pivotal turning point for most Filipinos, including myself, intensifying these structural vulnerabilities. Mass resignations and subsequent migration were triggered by exposure to unjust compensation, unreceived benefits, delayed insurance reimbursements, and working conditions characterized by long hours and inadequate protective equipment. Now, what's the government's response? Once again, I don't want to be political, but the government's response, including temporary deployment bans, proved controversial and heavily criticized, as such measures address the symptom, which is the migration, rather than the underlying causes of low wages and poor welfare. This situation demonstrates that the current intent to stay abroad is often motivated by a structural necessity, the flight from a demonstrably unstable and often unjust home healthcare environment, rather than merely an aspirational gain. Now let's look at the theories now. Trying to understand what intent to stay is. We all have to understand that the primary outcome variable that I'm going to show you or present here is the intent to stay, which measures the psychological commitment of a nurse to remain in their current employment and host country long term. Historically, models attempting to predict turnover were heavily reliant on job satisfaction or simply economic utility calculations. While job satisfaction is, or the effective response to one's job is certainly relevant, it provides an incomplete picture of retention among internationally educated nurses who face unique barriers to mobility beyond dissatisfaction. Simply put, it's not only money. A more robust theoretical lens is required to understand the complex relationship between in the individual migrant nurse and the organizational and community environments. Now, here comes one important factor, job embeddedness. Now, job embeddedness is a comprehensive psychological construct that describes the network of forces keeping an individual attached to their job. So this is another variable that I have focused on, which in turn I use to try to understand why Filipino nurses stay in their work. It is conceptually superior to job satisfaction in predicting long-term intent to stay because it incorporates non-work and non-economic factors, making it uniquely suited for analyzing the retention of internationally educated nurses or international migrants. Now, job embeddedness is structured around three core dimensions, which are being shown in the screen. And these dimensions are further divided into two main categories, the on-the-job and off-the-job components. Now, what are these dimensions once again? First, links, which refer to the formal and informal connections the nurse has to people, activities, or organizations like colleagues, professional networks, and community groups. Fit, which is the perceived compatibility between the nurse, their values, goals, and skills, and the job, the organization, and the community. And sacrifice, the perceived material or psychological costs of leaving a job or community, such as loss of tenure, pension, social capital, or financial stability. For international nurses, the off-the-job components like community fit, community links, community sacrifice are particularly salient as the difficulty of reestablishing family life, housing, and social networks often outweighs job-related dissatisfactions, thus acting as a powerful brake for voluntary turnover. The other factor that I focused on would be sociocultural adaptation. To define, sociocultural adaptation, or simply acculturation, refers to the adjustment process of internationally educated nurses to the norms, values, and practices of the host country's culture, both in the workplace and in the wider community. Now, that's explained through the following dimensions: interpersonal communication or communication, which relates to an individual's behavioral proficiency or skill in cross-cultural social encounters; language proficiency, which relates to an individual's self-reported level of host national language fluency; involvement, this encompasses an individual's competency in developing and maintaining social networks and friendships; and ecological adaptation. This relates to the migrant's behavioral adaptation to their surroundings or environment. Now, successful sociocultural adaptation is crucial for the holistic well-being of the migrant, leading to better overall health and physical well-being. Studies show that acculturation, particularly shifting closer to the host country's culture, is positively correlated with improved job satisfaction among Filipino RNs. However, this adaptation is fraught with a lot of stressors, including unexpected social and living environments, cultural differences, and critically, experiences of discrimination in professional life. Organizations must then move beyond basic orientation programs to implement robust initiatives that actively facilitate the transition and integration of IENs into the workforce. Once again, to reiterate, in my research, I've tried to look into job satisfaction, job embeddedness, and social-cultural adaptation as the main factors, which try to explain why Filipino nurses stay abroad. Now, my research has established that job embeddedness, the factors that I mentioned, social-cultural adaptation, and job satisfaction, are all positively correlated with intent to stay. However, a rigorous analysis of the causal pathways reveals a vital mediating relationship, which I will explain in a few. In our study, once again, empirical evidence suggests that while job embeddedness shows the strongest direct association with intent to stay, social-cultural adaptation does not directly predict ITS. Okay, let me show you the screen a bit. Instead, the influence of social-cultural adaptation is indirect, running through its positive associations with job satisfaction and job embeddedness, and that's best reflected in this diagram. This mechanism implies that simply imparting cultural knowledge or achieving minimal linguistic competence is insufficient for long-term retention. So what can we learn from that finding? Those efforts must then successfully translate into a positive perception of the workplace and a feeling of genuine belonging and compatibility before they can solidify the nurse's commitment to stay. Therefore, the host system retention policies must adopt a holistic framework where robust integration support fosters a positive work experience, which in turn allows the nurse to perform deep organizational and community ties essential for lasting retention. So that's what we found in my study. Now let's analyze embeddedness and adaptation a little bit deeper. Once again, the exploratory path modeling among Filipino nurses, such as those working in the UK, where my study is based primarily on, it has confirmed the hypothesized relationships, finding high levels of job embeddedness, social-cultural adaptation, and job satisfaction, and intent to stay among the respondents. Crucially, the analysis revealed that among the three core predictors, once again, job embeddedness showed the strongest positive association or relationship with intent to stay. This finding shifts the retention discussion away from simple motivation factors like salary increases toward fundamental structural and relational supports. In other words, if we're trying to understand intent to stay among Filipino nurses, we have to look at it not simply on the basis that, oh, this hospital pays better. We have to look at it at factors, non-economic, non-financial factors. Workplace integration, then, along with supportive environments and cultural acclimatization, are confirmed as the major forces shaping long-term intent to stay among these cohort. While nurses also may establish on-the-job links with colleagues or fit with their role, it's also important that the most significant vulnerability for international nurses often lies in the off-the-job embeddedness. The off-the-job measure comprises the community fit, community links, and community sacrifices associated with the host location. The decision to stay is intensely family-centric, driven by a desire to create a better life for their families. Once again, if we look at it as if we look at intent to stay among IENs, specifically among Filipino nurses, we have to look at it in a perspective that apart from pay, the desire for these nurses to provide a better life for his or her family is an important factor for us to consider when we're trying to create programs that will help retain these professionals. The family's social and economic integration is therefore inextricable from the nurse's professional retention. If the nurse's economic success is counterbalanced by the family's social isolation or difficulties in accessing services, the total sacrifice required to stay can be too high for these Filipino nurses. Consequently, for married nurses, policymakers must also actively focus on improving the community link by addressing practical barriers such as children's schooling, spousal employment, and housing issues. Retention policies that focus solely on the employee as an isolated worker, neglecting the support structure of the entire family unit, are inherently incomplete and destined to fail or for optimal results or suboptimal results. In addition, despite high professional competence, Filipino nurses encounter significant challenges during the adaptation phase. And this is an important thing for host countries to also address. These include dealing with new cultural differences and the shocking reality of unexpected social and living environments. While some studies suggest Filipino nurses perceive a higher likelihood of their clinical skills being utilized compared to other IEN groups, suggesting a good professional fit, this does not shield them from cultural challenges. The work experience of IENs often involves discriminatory behaviors, which interact with and intensify existing work-related stressors. The necessity of developing resilience to cope with such personal and professional challenges underscores the inadequacy of relying solely on individual coping mechanisms. And so hospitals or the host countries should then plan around that. Now, this is the drivers of intent to stay and turnover vary significantly depending on the host country's structural reliance on expatriate labor and its immigration framework, and that's important for us to consider. Simply put, when we look at intent to stay, it's also important that we have to consider that depending on what country we're talking about. As you can see in this summary table, the primary pull factors or the motivation to leave the Philippines are often similar: compensation and opportunity. But the retention predictors and obstacles to long-term embeddedness are unique to each major region. Let's look at North America and the UK first. In both regions, the strongest predictor for staying long-term is job embeddedness, the psychological and practical fit within the community and the workplace. However, the obstacles are significant. In North America, nurses actually face acculturation stress, discrimination, and high cost of living. In the UK, the challenges include issues of contractual debt bondage and high financial fees for exit. Now, consider the Middle East, which includes the Gulf Cooperation Council or the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This region often functions differently. The Middle East is often seen as a stepping stone destination. Many nurses use it to accumulate capital quickly before moving onward to Western nations that offer permanent residency and long-term integration. Consequently, the main retention predictor here is job satisfaction, driven by short-term financial motivations. The turnover factors are fundamental: low nurse-to-patient ratios, discrimination, and inadequate accommodations. Therefore, if retention is the goal of the GCC efforts must prioritize fundamental improvements in material welfare and work environments to compete with the long-term embeddedness advantages offered by Western countries. Now let's compare further the challenges and ethical dilemmas that Filipino nurses face abroad. Now, in the UK, while Western nations typically offer robust pathways to long-term residency that favor embeddedness, systemic ethical challenges can distort true intent to stay. Let's take UK, for example. There's actually an ethical crisis in the UK in the form of coerced retention. A critical and alarming issue involves the use of punitive contract clauses, particularly in the UK. International nurses working for the NHS trusts and private care homes are subjected to clauses requiring them to repay a significant sums. In some extreme cases, as steep as £14,000. That's equivalent to, if I'm not mistaken, 1.1 million Philippine peso if they resign before the end of their contracted term. These clauses are designed to recoup recruitment costs, including flights, visas, and training fees that the employer paid for the nurse. However, this practice forces nurses, many of whom served in the front line during the pandemic, to remain in positions despite illness, poor working conditions, or even bullying due to the fear of insurmountable death. This systemic manipulation of contractual clauses or terms creates a state of coerced retention rather than voluntary commitment. This outcome fundamentally compromises the value of any observed intent to stay data, as the decision to remain is driven by financial issues likened by legal experts as debt bondage rather than genuine embeddedness. The proliferation of such practices undermines established bilateral guidelines for ethical recruitment and provides host organizations with an unfair, unethical mechanism to minimize their turnover costs. Now, let's look at the United States. Now, in the United States, the challenges in this country, while generally avoiding widespread debt bondage issues seen in the UK, center on transitional gap. IENs often report a disconnect between their initial expectations, the greener pasture thinking, and the reality of their relocation. What that means is that there's a gap between what we'd expect our life would be when we work in the US versus what we're really seeing when we're already there in the US. And these actually gap includes encountering difficulties related to discrimination and integration. While Filipino nurses may experience high levels of job satisfaction, positively correlated with acculturation, organizations must actively facilitate this transition to bridge the expectation-reality gap and ensure cultural stressors do not lead to attrition. Now, for the Middle East, in the Middle East, high turnover is often accepted as part of the operating model, characterized by short-term contracts and, as I mentioned a while ago, stepping stone migration pattern. Nurses frequently cite major turnover factors like work-related quality issues, including low nurse-to-patient ratios, which heighten stress and discrimination. Suggested areas for improvement cited by nurses include enhanced financial motivations, greater administrative support, and improved quality of life and better work environment conditions. For GCC countries to move beyond being a high turnover transit point, they must fundamentally address these issues of basic material welfare and professional respect. Okay, so that's how we should be looking at it and how we compare intent to stay across the major destinations that we discussed. Now, what does this imply? What's in it for us then? Now, let's discuss the implications for healthcare systems, the financial, the operational, and the domestic. Now, once again, what we know so far, we've already talked about what are the factors that make Filipino nurses stay. And we've already also discussed some of the factors what the host countries do to recruit these nurses or internationally educated nurses. Now, so far, what we know, why are they doing that? Because they face a nursing shortage. Now, the challenge to that one is that does not only stop with recruitment. It also transcends or moves beyond the challenge of retaining these professionals. Why is that the case? Why is it a challenge for host countries to ensure that they don't only recruit the number of nurses that they need, they also have to make sure that they retain these professionals? The reason for that is actually clear. High nurse turnover rates present a significant financial and operational challenge to healthcare organizations globally. The expense of actually replacing the expense of replacing staff far outweighs the cost of retention programs, providing a powerful economic rationale for investments in job embeddedness. Research indicates that the cost of replacing a single RN can range significantly, typically falling between 38,000 to 64,000 US dollars. This substantial figure is derived from the multiple direct and indirect components. Once again, to simply put, in order to recruit a nurse, usually the agencies or the hospitals hiring these IENs typically spend between 38,000 to 64,000. Why do they spend that much money? Why do they spend that much money? They spend it for the following reasons: recruitment and hiring expenses, training and onboarding expenses, and vacancy and opportunity costs. So if the host countries spend that much money, and if the IEN or a Filipino nurse that they have recruited decides to leave before their contracted term, then you would understand that, okay, I have to get back the money that I spent, right? And so it's important for it's important for these host countries now and the organizations recruiting these IENs to come up with a plan to retain these nurses. And so the simple message here is clear. They have to focus on the factors that we have discussed earlier: satisfaction, embeddedness, and social cultural adaptation, which leads us to insights. Investing in comprehensive job embeddedness programs is thus a critical capital investment. High turnover results in a loss of intellectual capital and productivity, reducing long-term organizational knowledge and stability. Now, retention strategies, in contrast, reduce advertising and recruitment expenses. If they keep the nurses that they have recruited, then they don't have to advertise for additional posting, right? So this reduce, once again, advertising and recruitment expenses, decrease vacancy costs, and minimize termination expenses. So that's the implication for hospital systems. The other thing, beyond the financial metrics, high turnover severely compromises patient care and operational stability. Nurse turnover actually exacerbates staffing shortages, leading directly to increased workloads and higher rates of burnout among remaining nurses, thereby initiating a self-perpetuating cycle of attrition. The resulting shortages have measurable negative effects on clinical outcomes. Studies report that high turnover is associated with compromised quality of care, potential patient errors, communication failures, difficulties in medication management, and compromised patient follow-up. This degradation in service quality leads to longer hospital stays and increased readmission rates, which incur further financial penalties for healthcare facilities. Therefore, fostering intent to stay among IENs is not merely a human resources function, but also a direct contributor to patient safety and quality management. Now, we've talked about what should the recruiters do, right? Now, what is this phenomenon? What is its effect or consequence for the Philippines? Obviously, the answer is clear. This is exacerbating the domestic shortage. I think I can show you. Yes, this one. Now, the consequences, once again, the successful recruitment of Filipino nurses abroad comes at a profound systemic cost to the Philippines. The continuous outmigration places a significant threat on the domestic health system by exacerbating the local shortage of nurses. Less than 25% of cities and municipalities in the Philippines meet the World Health Organization Human Resource for Health Density recommendation. Yet, outmigration persists. Nurses still leave. This sustained brain drain is primarily attributable to the structural failures that the domestic government has struggled to resolve. Policies instituted to address shortages, such as temporary deployment bans, have been met with criticism, as I mentioned a while ago, because they restrict nurses from seeking higher compensation abroad without addressing the structural factors at home, such as delayed benefit disbursement, low wages, and job insecurity. The primary driver of domestic instability remains the failure to provide job security and favorable working conditions, forcing highly skilled personnel to migrate for professional and economic survival. So that this is the impact. Now, what can we do to address? Now, what can we do both for the Philippines and for the host countries? Now, let's talk about the strategic frameworks and recommendations for long-term retention. Sustaining the Filipino nursing workforce requires a dual policy framework then, one focused on ethical embedded retention by host nations, and another on structural reform and stabilization in the source country, which is the Philippines. Now, let's talk first about the recommendations for destination or host countries and healthcare organizations. The core policy mandate for host countries is to shift retention focus from mitigating turnover costs to actively building job embeddedness. Now, how do we operationalize this? To maximize on-the-job embeddedness, links, and fit, nursing administrators must proactively promote the development of a positive clinical work environment. Strategies include facilitating social gatherings and outside work activities to help nurses establish positive relationships with colleagues. Furthermore, ensuring that the organization's goals and values align seamlessly with the nursing staff's professional expectations is also important for fostering a sense of belonging and increasing retention. Now, to secure off-the-job embeddedness, which is actually essential for long-term commitment, policymakers must focus on the family unit. This involves implementing specific support programs for married nurses, such as assisting with children's schooling, providing referrals for a spouse employment, and offering housing assistance. Addressing these non-work logistical and social challenges directly reduces the perceived cost. Another thing that we can do is to, I already mentioned this one, secure off-the-job embeddedness, yes. Another thing that we can do is looking at the ethical and sociocultural integration mandates. Host countries must enforce rigorous adherence to ethical international recruitment practices. This requires checking if local recruitment agencies are licensed by the appropriate Philippine government bodies and being cautious of social media advertisements. Most critically, destination countries must legislatively prohibit the use of contract clauses that demand steep financial repayment upon resignation. The continuation of such clauses is unacceptable as it creates systemic exploitation, making genuine consent and voluntary intent to stay impossible to measure. Furthermore, integrating Filipino nurses requires systematic support for sociocultural adaptation. I think I have a slide for that one. Yes. Once again, integrating Filipino nurses requires systematic support for sociocultural adaptation. Organizations, organizations must implement programs that extend beyond simple orientation to include ongoing cultural competency training, peer mentorship, and robust anti-discrimination policies. This focus on acculturation, particularly when it leads to improved job satisfaction, is a confirmed strategy for enhanced retention. Okay, so those are the recommendations for host countries. Now, what can we do for the source country, which is the Philippines? My recommendations are the following. To effectively curb the persistent outflow of skilled nurses, the Philippine government must undertake fundamental structural reforms to address push factors. First, structural economic reform. Policy action must support and accelerate the proposed legislation such as the House Bill number 5276 and Senate Bill 2694, which seek to amend nursing laws to substantially raise the minimum basic salary for nurses. Increasing salaries and ensuring timely provision of benefits are critical steps toward reducing nurse migration and the resulting brain drain. The second recommendation is domestic workforce stabilization. To address high burnout rates and the structural shortage, the government must prioritize the efficient utilization of available resources. This includes mobilizing existing resources such as filling vacant government regular positions, which provides job security and more favorable working conditions. Collaboration between the government, private sector, and the nonprofit organizations is also necessary to invest in healthcare infrastructure, ensuring facilities are adequately equipped and reducing resource-related stress on domestic staff. The third recommendation that I have is leveraging the diaspora for global health equity. The Filipino diaspora represents a powerful source of social capital, knowledge, and potential policy influence. Policy must formalize bilateral and multilateral guidelines and codes of ethics with partner nations to ensure reciprocal arrangements and consistent monitoring of standards of health staff. Engagement with diaspora networks, such as the Filipino Nursing Diaspora Network. One organization in the UK is the Philippine Nurses Association UK, or the FNA UK, and the Philippine Nurses and other nursing organizations can facilitate lobbying for improved working conditions abroad and support capacity building initiatives back home. Lastly, harnessing return of talent programs such as the Balik Scientist Program in the Philippines must be optimized to ensure viable opportunities for growth and reintegration for professionals seeking to return to the Philippines. And this is a summary of what I have recommended on this slide. We look at three components of job embeddedness and how they influence Filipino nurses' intent to stay, along with strategies host systems can use to support retention. You can see here the first component is links, which refers to the formal and informal relationships formed in the workplace. For Filipino nurses, strong relationships with colleagues and supervisors greatly influence their decision to stay. So we have to maximize on that one. Strategies that help strengthen these connections include fostering a positive clinical environment, encouraging social gatherings, and promoting team cohesion. The second component is fit, or how well the nurse feels aligned with their role, the organization's values, and the workplace culture. When Filipino nurses feel that their skills are being fully utilized and that the organization shares their values, they are more likely to remain. To support this, organizations should clearly align goals with nursing values and provide well-defined career development pathways for these nurses. The third component is sacrifice, which looks at what nurses feel they would lose if they left. Not just the job, but also the community and the lifestyle they've built. For internationally educated nurses, or IENs, this includes family stability, community connections, and housing. Policymakers and institutions can then improve retention by supporting spouses' employment, children's schooling, and housing security. Overall, the strengthening these three components, links, fit, and sacrifice, can significantly improve retention for Filipino nurses working in host systems. Now, for the last, I think, second to the last slide that I have, this slide presents to you the dual policy recommendations that I have for retention and ethical migration. Starting with the Philippines, the first policy area that I have here is economic and welfare reform. This calls for substantial increases in nurse salaries, as I mentioned a while ago, and ensuring timely release of benefits. The evidence shows that low pay and delayed benefits are major push factors that compel nurses to go abroad. And so we have to address that. The second policy area for the Philippines is domestic workforce strategy. Once again, this focuses on mobilizing resources to fill regular government nursing positions. Strengthening job security and improving working conditions help reduce structural burnout, encourage nurses to stay in the local workforce. I've known friends for a very long time who decided to stay in the Philippines because of these reasons. And so institutions should focus on these factors, even though you can't pay that much as how US does or the UK does. Please, you're making an environment that nurses don't feel compelled to leave. For host countries, one major action is workplace integration, as I mentioned a while ago. Or host systems need structured programs that promote cultural competence, reduce discrimination, and support acculturation. Research shows that when internationally educated nurses feel culturally supported, job satisfaction and retention significantly improve. I'm citing one example in a hospital. A hospital in California has this policy wherein no one should call out a Filipino nurse if they decide to speak in Tagalog um, amongst themselves. And that could be could be construed as a simple policy, but believe me when I say that not all hospitals have that kind of policy. But that alone is a way that the institution is showing their support to their own nurses, to the cultural diversity of the workforce that they have. Another host country priority is ethical recruitment and contracts. This includes banning or restricting contract clauses that require large financial penalties for resignation. Removing these practices prevents situations akin to debt bondage and supports truly ethical recruitment. Finally, at the global or bilateral level, diaspora engagement is a powerful strategy. I'd like to reiterate that this means building collaborative relationships with diaspora nursing communities to inform policy, advocate for change, and support return of investment or return of talent initiatives. The diaspora holds tremendous influence, resources, and expertise, not to mention the connections that can benefit both the source and the destination countries. All in all, this framework shows that ethical migration and retention must be addressed simultaneously, not just benefiting the host country, but also the Philippines. And this should be done nationally, institutionally, and as well as globally. So, in conclusion, the intent to stay of Filipino nurses to stay abroad should be understood as a complex product of global demand intersecting with deeply rooted structural deficiencies in the source country, mediated by critical psychological integration factors in the host environment. The presentation and my research are both showing you that while economic factors initiate migration, job embeddedness is the most powerful determinant of long-term commitment. This embeddedness, encompassing linkages, fit, and perceived sacrifice associated with leaving the job and community, must become the focal point of all retention strategies. For global healthcare systems, by the way, I'm showing you pictures when I was in the UK. For global healthcare systems, the evidence is clear. Sustained reliance on transactional recruitment is fiscally unsustainable, leading to staggering turnover costs and compromised patient safety. The structural shift must be towards investing in holistic programs that secure off-the-job embeddedness, addressing the needs of the nurse's entire family unit and not just the nurse. Simultaneously, host nations bear an ethical responsibility to eliminate exploitative contractual practices that coerce retention, thereby ensuring that the reported intent to stay is voluntary and reflective of genuine integration. Lastly, for the Philippines, by the way, right now I'm showing you pictures of myself here in the US. For the Philippines, long-term stabilization requires urgent political will to implement structural economic reforms, including substantial salary increases and guaranteed job security in the public sector. Without addressing these critical push factors, the country will continue to export its highly trained human capital, jeopardizing its own national health infrastructure. Ultimately, sustaining the global Filipino nursing workforce demands coordinated, ethical policy action across all stakeholders, the source country, the destination country, and international governance bodies to protect the professional dignity and ensure the voluntary, high-quality retention of this essential global workforce. So, this is the last slide. What does this mean for us then? What can we do moving forward? The future of global healthcare depends on retaining, supporting, and valuing Filipino nursing diaspora. The investment in these professionals has been made by their home country and by ours. The ethical and economic imperative is now to shift our strategy from one of constant recruitment to one of genuine holistic retention and integration. The Filipino nurse is already committed to the global community. Our commitment must now be to them. That should be something that I should be telling the host countries. But yes, and with that, I'd like to leave that wherever you may be, as long as your needs are met, and your needs are met not only financially, but also for those non-financial concerns like the welfare of your family and yourself, then you'd ensure intent to stay. With that, That is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nieve. That's a very wonderful presentation. And maybe before we proceed to the questions, I would like to acknowledge that the participants here are not only coming from the Philippines, you also have participants from Dominica, Belize, Namibia, India, Jordan, and of course from the Philippines. So again, that's a very informative and meaningful presentation. As we continue, we invite the participants to share their thoughts in the GC or in the chat. And of course, your participation and your perspective will add depth to today's session and highlight the richness of our nursing experiences around the world. At this juncture, I think we have around 4 or 5 questions. Um, would you want to read the first one, or would you let me read the question for you on the Q&A?
I can read the okay, and maybe I can stop sharing. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, okay. Let's look at the questions. I'm starting with Dr. Jerome's question. Dr. Blaise, as you engage with Filipino nurses across different countries, what personal narratives or recurring themes have you noticed that most strongly influence their decision to continue building their lives abroad? Um, this is actually a good question. This is the same question that I had when I was doing my dissertation on intent to stay. That was actually based in the UK. But the good thing about that project, just a quick side note, the good thing about that project is that it influences well. Um, it's starting to influence how we onboard foreign nurses here in my own institution because I'm consulting on a project that that primarily affects how the process is being done. So that's a good thing. And it's the same question that I had in mind. What are what personal narratives or recurring themes have you noticed that most strongly influence their decision to continue building their lives? The most obvious answer to this one is obviously pay. We know full well that the uh, pay that we earn here, or even with the salary that I've had when I was in the UK, is actually much significantly better compared to the amount of money that I used to earn in the Philippines. And that's once again, that's me saying from from someone who's been in positions in the Philippines that actually paid well for someone who is working in the Philippines. But the other factors that they also shared with me is actually family. They wanted a better life for their family. And if you work in the UK, for instance, when they move there together with their family, the healthcare is actually free. The healthcare is free. The schooling is also free to a certain age. And those two factors alone actually significantly push them to like move overseas and just stay there because the benefits that they get from staying and working overseas far outweigh the benefits that they're receiving when they were in the Philippines. And that's the same case when you're talking about the US. The US also has the same benefit. The pay is also better when you compare it to how much we earn in the Philippines. And at the same time, there are also opportunities for the family so that they can all thrive as a unit. So those are the main reasons why. And the third reason is actually a very recurring reason why they also want to stay abroad. And this may be anecdotal as well, is that there is a when you work in the UK and United States, you can be a citizen of those countries. And when you are afforded citizenship to those countries, you're also afforded for one of the main reasons is you're also afforded the same um, benefits as a citizen for that country. Personally, on a personal note, if I will become a US citizen, for example, I will be afforded like a passport that will allow me to freely move across countries, for most countries across the globe. So that's a benefit for someone who loves to travel. And once again, I can't speak for many other Filipino nurses, but you know that's the main thing. The main thing is citizenship, and with citizenship comes benefits that they receive. And it's not it's a mutualism. The Filipino nurses and the family benefits, as well as the host country countries also benefit because they're retaining their workforce. So that's the recurring thing that I've had. And then continuing with the second question, looking at the global Filipino nursing diaspora, how do you think their stories of belonging, adaptation, and aspiration can guide policymakers in host countries and Philippines to better support their long-term intentions? I would say, on the whole, I would answer this one as the stories are powerful. And so when we collectively tell a story saying that you should take care of us, then that's a powerful impetus for us to compel our government, for instance, to institute policies, to support policies that support the welfare of nurses. That also extends, and this is a personal advocate of mine as well, that also extends to if we should use these stories to push nurses to hold positions in the government. It's one thing to advocate for it through rallies. That's well and good. I'm not saying it's not effective, but in order to be more strategic with implementing changes, you have to be in positions of influence, and that means nurses have to run. The nurses have to have to be represented in the government. Okay, so Sir Dennis could be a good leader for us to do that, you know. But that's just me saying that advocacy should not only be isolated on rallies or holding like giving out policy statements. It should be practical. And nurses should be there at the table having these discussions.
Thank
I
you.
hope I
Thank
answered.
you. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nieve. In the Q&A box, we have three questions. The first one is, what was the biggest challenge you faced when you first worked abroad, and how did you adapt?
Thank you so much, Nor Al Azam, for that question. Um, the first country that I actually worked at is the United Kingdom. The okay, the biggest challenge that I've had when I worked there was actually the homesickness. Before, when I was in the Philippines, I thought that was just a a fleeting thing, you know. I mean, something that I won't be affected by that, you know. And I used to think as well, and don't judge me on this one. I used to think that maybe they're just not strong enough to deal with that problem. But then when I worked there, within the first week, I actually cried. You know, I actually cried, and I didn't know why, and only to find out that was homesickness. Um, I moved to the UK with that move came with me not being able to drive around, me not being able to talk freely to the persons that I live with because I lived in an apartment complex. Uh, Me being unable to fully use my phones because I didn't have SIM right away. So there was just a lot of things that I didn't have when I first moved overseas. And that was really challenging. But one thing that really helped me was connecting with my family. I actually made sure that I call them daily. And if you don't have that, the second thing that really helped me was to seek professional help, like mental health services. The good thing about the host countries, they do have those services. Um, I would say that the the onboarding practices of the facility that I worked with before in the UK was not as accepting when I got there. When I say not as accepting, their onboarding practices for internationally educated nurses is not as friendly as it is right now. So, and my agency also just left me in the UK. The moment that I got there, their work was done. They did not continue their support to ensure that I fully integrated with where I'm at. So that made it a bigger challenge for me. But then, yeah, I mean, I made sure that I continued the contact with my family. I sought professional help. I had to speak with someone, otherwise I'll go crazy. And then I also had to also accept that this is the reality. Sometimes it's just that, you know, it's also a matter of okay, you recognizing, okay, this is a problem. How do I fix this? How do I address this? And who do I contact if I need help? If the problem is beyond my capacity to deal with. So those are the three main things that I did. So one of the things, one example is, for example, if you don't like the first placement that you were with, I discussed with my agency, hey, can I be transferred to this facility? because this facility is where my friends are. So I did that. And I actually transferred. So from Midlands, I transferred to the Cambridge, where I actually um, got promoted to management positions as well after 3 months of being there. So, that works. You just have to really acknowledge that this is a problem that needs solving. What can I do? I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. That's very thought provoking. Maybe just a segue. I think the third question is somehow related to that. Personally, what would be your main determinant that made you move to
Uh,
UK to US from
This
UK?
this is actually a good question because it's a bit ironic. My research was based on intent to stay in the UK, and I left the UK. So I mean, I think on a professional note, I'd just like to mention that my research actually found that the factors that I mentioned, job satisfaction, job embeddedness, and social-cultural adaptation, um, was able to explain 2/3 of intent to stay. What that means is that there are a third uh, 1/3 of what makes people stay has not been studied in my dissertation. So, and I would say that the reason why I left was part of that 1/3. There are factors that go beyond embeddedness, that go beyond satisfaction, and go beyond social cultural adaptation. You're wanting to find something else, professionally speaking. I would say is one of the reasons why I left the UK and US. Another thing as well, the practical thing is that when I went to the UK, I I had it in mind that okay, the moment that I go here, I'll just consider this as a stepping stone. So that's what I had in mind before. So I processed my application to the US, and then it came. I got the interview for for immigration. That's another thing. So it's sort of like a natural movement for me when the US government already offered me, okay, hey, this is your green card, you can now move to us. So I felt like at the time I was already 2 years into my UK practice, as I just felt, okay, I think this is a good time for me to move out. Which is actually once again a factor that may not fall on the factors that I mentioned during my presentation. So there's that. There's also a personal one, but I couldn't share that overseas. But suffice it to say that there are factors that have not been covered in my study, and you may have your own factors too. That will compel you to move from, let's say, Middle East to the US or UK.
Yeah, thank you. That's fair. So let's go to the second question from
All right.
uh, Ms. Arniego. How do nurses plan to adapt to cultural differences and basically adapt to new healthcare systems also?
Okay. I love this question. Thank you so much, Peach, for this question. Now, how do Filipino nurses plan to adapt cultural differences in new healthcare system in a foreign country? Okay, so this is twofold. First one, you do your research. Okay, don't get blinded with the fact that okay, if I go to the US, I'll be rich. That can be a case, but it won't be automatic. I'd like to say that one to you. This is a personal and an evidence-based statement. Um, the thing with moving to another country is that it takes a lot of adjustment. You have to adjust with your workplace, and on top of that, you also have to adjust with your workmates. That includes you having to speak in English all the time and having to deal with the nuances of your patients. Your patients have different accents. They may speak English, but they may speak it differently. They may have slangs that you don't understand. Okay, so those are the things that you have to research early on before you actually move to the UK. Apart from that, apart from the workplace adjustment, you also have to research where will you live? How far will you be? How far will you be from your workplace? What's your primary mode of transportation? Because US itself is a very driver-centric country. So you kind of have to learn how to drive before you move out. Otherwise, you'll be utilizing the public transportation. Now, the public transportation is unreliable. It depends state by state. There are states that have good public systems, and there are also that do not have good public systems. When I was in the UK, the public health system was really reliable, so I really didn't feel the need to buy my own car. But when I moved to the US, within a month, I bought my own car. So that's one consideration as well that you have to research on beforehand. And at the same time, you ask people that are already here about what are the things that I should be looking at. Join groups like I think if you're planning to go to the US and this is not a sponsored ad, you can join Lefora, for example. Then that's a good resource for nurses planning to move to the US because they share advices. So that's that. Do your own research. The second thing is the on the other side of the spectrum is the agencies that you're going to be working with. If you apply, make sure that you apply with an agency that has a good onboarding support. Some agencies will just focus on moving you from the Philippines to the destination country, and their work is done. Some agencies do that. I've had that. But there are also agencies that they don't stop by just moving you. They make sure that you're okay, that you're fully integrated with the place that you're living with, that you're fully adjusted to your work. That if, for example, you're short of money, they can lend you some. Okay, so look for those types of agencies. You do your research and you work with those agencies rather than just being blinded by um, offers that say, okay, if you apply with us, you can migrate in 6 months' time. That's well and good, but at the same time, there are also drawbacks. So you have to do your own research.
Okay, thank you. Do you have time for, I think, two more? Just maybe
Sure,
quick
sure.
responses.
Hmm.
First one, it's in the webinar chat, how to prevent burnout. And secondly, basically a comparison of being a nurse leader in the Philippines and
Okay.
outside of the country.
All right. Okay, so I'll start first with the how to prevent burnout. Now, as an IEN, as an internationally educated nurse, there are lots of ways that you can do to prevent burnout. With work, sometimes it's a thing that you think, okay, oh, this is just how how work is. And sometimes, I mean, sorry, not sometimes, most of the time that is the case. Work can be stressful. Nursing can be stressful. But at the same time, you can also advocate. The good thing about, let's say, US, for instance, there are shared governance councils in the United States health systems wherein you can be a part of, and those shared governance council, let's say clinical practice council, they actually meet together and discuss concerns and try to plan how to address those concerns, and they are actually under the leadership. Okay, so they take in the comments from those organizations and then make changes as to how the nurse to patient ratio should be, or what's needed in our unit, those kinds of things. So you can do that to prevent workplace related burnout. Now for the personal burnout, there's a good community of Filipino nurses in the United States and even in the United Kingdom. You just have to reach out. Okay, reach out to the organizations. You do your research beforehand. You communicate with them. There are actually, let's say, for example, here in North Carolina, because I'm part of the Philippine Nurses Association of North Carolina, whenever we hear new nurses coming in, we actually hold welcoming events for them to make sure that they have an organization that they can rely on. And at the same time, there is a community that they can reach out to. And then slowly, usually it just trickles down, from there, from meeting other Filipino nurses, they make a small community and they go to church together, they go to groceries together. So it starts from there, just reaching out, try to make the connection. And when you do that, you prevent burnout. The third thing that I would say that can help you prevent burnout is maximizing on your hobbies. Your work is not or it should not be your only life. You have to have a life outside of work. And that means maximizing on your hobbies. So for example, if you're into hiking, for example, if you work in North Carolina, there are a lot of spots that you can do hiking at. So if you love beaches, we also have some beach here that you can like swim, obviously for summertime, not at this time. But yeah, so what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of resources in your community if you move, depending on what state we're talking about, of course. But there are a lot of resources that are just waiting to be tapped on, if that makes sense. So you just have to build that connection, reach out, and then make sure that you have a life outside of work. And then the second question is, Doctor, is a nurse leader abroad is more challenging than nurse leader in the Philippines? I would say yes. It's challenging. Um, it's challenging in many ways, but I would say the personal ones that really affected me or resonated with me. When I was a clinical lead and deputy manager in the UK before, one thing that made it a little bit challenging is that in the Philippines, when I was a program chair, I just governed fellow Filipino nurses. And you just have to deal with the different personalities, the positions of the people that you're talking with, the students, the parents, and stuff like that. But then when I moved to the UK, you have to the challenge is even, I would say, harder in a sense that you're not only taking care of Filipino uh, workers, you're also taking care of foreigners. Foreigners in our perspective. I work with Indian nationals, British nationals, African nationals. So, and they have their own set of practices as well. And you have to be cognizant of those changes, cognizant and sensitive to those changes, because what's acceptable for us may not be acceptable for them. And I had to learn that by practice because I didn't really necessarily know all of those nuances before I came to the UK. So that's one thing that made being a nurse leader even more challenging. And that's the same here. Because of that training, when I held board positions here in the US, it's a bit, um, I wouldn't say easier, but yes, easier for me because I had that experience when I was in the UK. So yes, it's challenging in that sense. But then the leadership aspect, how to talk to people, how to lead people, it's the same, to be honest with you. It's the same. It's just that you have to deal with the nuances of having to deal with people from different races and culture.
Thank you. And yeah, I think in the interest of time, unless you still have a minute to spare to answer one question, it's
There's another
basically
question? Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Okay, let's answer this one. I think we can. And hi, sir. Given the situation in the United States regarding their stance on nursing not being considered a professional degree, what would be the impact on nursing students like me here in the Philippines, especially since many of us aspire to work abroad, particularly in the United States? Oh, okay. So, this is a good question. So, number one, I'd like to sort of emphasize that or give a context that the change. Okay, sorry, my phone is talking. Okay. I'd like to give a context that the classification of um, of nur- of nursing not being a profession is under the Department of Education's jurisdiction. It does not. Okay, simple answer is it does not have an impact on migration. If you're just looking at it at that issue, and would that affect you aspiring to move here to work, that does not affect you. It affects uh, individuals like me. Because when I say me, someone who is pursuing a master's or so actually doctorate degree in nursing here in the US, because the impact of nursing not being classified as a profession is that it capped the amount of money that I can loan from the government. So from 200,000 right now, the current classification of nursing is I think it's applied sciences or something like that. It is now reduced to 100,000. So that's the impact. So if you are planning on pursuing graduate studies here in the United States, then this reclassification issue would impact you. But as to you trying or wanting to move to the US, it does not. Now, on that note, there are other factors that may affect you, but that the classification of nursing as not a professional isn't one of those reasons.
thank you very much. Very insightful discussion indeed, and very interesting input and questions from the participants. Once again, thank you, Dr. Blaise Nieve. Thank you for all of the participants for your active engagement. At this point, we'll be moving towards the closing of our program. Let's listen to the President of the Pacific Nursing Service Organization, Dr. Patria Manalaysay, for her closing remarks.
Day to everyone, and thank you for staying with us through this truly enriching and meaningful session. On behalf of the Pacific Nursing Service Organization, it is my privilege to deliver the closing remarks for today's webinar featuring the exceptional Dr. Blaise Nieve, PhD, RN, CMSRN, Nurse Executive Advanced, Board Certified, Fellow, Society of Internationally Educated Nurses. His presentation, Global Journeys, Local Commitments, Understanding Filipino Nurses Intent to Stay Abroad, resonated so deeply with all of us educators, leaders, migrant nurses, and advocates. Dr. Nieve reminded us that behind every Filipino nurse abroad is a story of courage, sacrifice, purpose, and unwavering commitment. His insights illuminated the complex motivations that shape our diaspora nurses' decisions to remain overseas. Motivations grounded in family, faith, professional fulfillment, and the hope of creating a better life. As he emphasized, understanding these intentions is not just an academic exercise. It is essential for shaping policies and programs that support the well-being and professional growth of our global Filipino nursing workforce. Today's session reinforces a powerful truth. Filipino nurses are global in footprint, but local in heart. Regardless of where we serve, our contribution to health systems, communities, and future generations remain deeply rooted in the values we carry from home. I also would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to our dedicated partners, St. Anthony's College, the Filipino Nursing Diaspora Network, and the World Continuing Education Alliance. Your shared commitment continues to spark dialogue, learning, and collaboration across borders. As we close, let us carry forward the inspiration we gained today. May we continue to raise the voices of migrant nurses, deepen our understanding of their journeys, and work together to build systems where they are valued, supported, and empowered. Maraming salamat, and may we all continue to lead with compassion, purpose, and global vision.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Manalaysay, for that very inspiring closing message. As we conclude, we once again thank our partners for making this webinar possible: the Filipino Nursing Diaspora Network, Pacific Nursing Service Organization Incorporated, St. Anthony's College, and the World Continuing Education Alliance. And of course, thank you to everyone who joined us today. Your presence and engagement made discussions like this meaningful and impactful. We hope to see you again in our future activities. Stay safe, stay connected, and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you very much.